are Anchor. Stay tuned for updated real news.
Hello, Anchor Daily News viewers. The conflict between Russia and Ukraine has taken a critical turn these days as the intensity of the war increases day by day. Recent developments have revealed unexpected moves that are seriously affecting the course of the war. Since the beginning of the war, the world has been keenly following the military strategies of the parties, their unexpected allies, and their losses on the ground. Today, we'll take an in-depth look at the new developments that could change the fate of the war. This time, however, there's much more than the military front. Russia's huge losses weren't limited to the number of troops on the front line. The heavy costs of the war are putting more and more pressure on the Russian people. More and more people are voicing their opposition to the war and their serious unrest in the country. The Russian people are now taking their discontent with the war to the streets, and the echoes of this protest are beginning to be felt in the Kremlin. The growing popular resistance puts the Russian government, which needs a large manpower force to continue the war, in a difficult situation. However, the Kremlin is trying to fill the shortage of soldiers in different ways. Russia aims to close this gap with foreign soldiers it's trying to force into the war. However, this move hasn't yielded the expected results. The Ukrainian army has recently achieved great success in neutralizing these soldiers. So much so that the 4 soldiers brought from North Korea were completely neutralized in Ukraine's counterattack. Let's take a look at the developments on this issue. According to Ukrainian news agencies, in a recent attack near the Donetsk region, Ukrainian forces targeted the Russian front and killed 6 North Korean soldiers. These soldiers were among the foreign forces that Russia has brought into the war, and their presence on the front line has sparked controversy both within the Russian military and internationally. Unnamed Ukrainian intelligence sources said the attack was carried out using drones and precision missile systems. More than 20 Russian soldiers were killed in the attack, including 6 North Korean officers. This is further evidence that Russia is in a difficult position in the war. Faced with opposition from its own people who do not want to participate directly in the war, Russia has begun to recruit troops from other countries to fill the shortfall in its battlefield manpower. The presence of North Korean soldiers on the front line is part of this strategy. However, the Kremlin's calculations were seriously undermined when these soldiers were neutralized without being present on the front line. Not only North Korean troops, but also significant elements of the Russian army suffered heavy losses in the Ukrainian offensive. In particular, Ukraine's long-range missile strikes exposed Russia's weaknesses on the front line, while the inadequacy of its air defense systems also drew attention. According to Russian sources, 3 North Korean officers wounded in the attack were urgently sent to Moscow for treatment. No clear information was given about the health status of these soldiers who are being treated in Moscow. However, following this incident, reactions started to rise within Russia. While Russian sources described the presence of North Korean soldiers on the front line as an unnecessary intervention, Putin's administration has been at the center of criticism due to the inadequacy of the air defense systems. In particular, failed air defense operations stand out as one of Russia's biggest weaknesses on the front. Moscow's air defense systems are inadequate against modern Ukrainian technologies, leading to heavy losses for the Russian army. While the Kremlin is expected to take action on this issue, the presence of North Korean troops on the ground continues to be a source of discomfort for both Russian soldiers and the Russian public. On the other hand, Russia's efforts to recruit troops from external sources are not limited to North Korea. The Kremlin has made agreements with various countries to create foreign military units that it can use in war. However, the failure of this strategy reveals Russia's desperation on the front line. It's known that North Korean officers undergo a special preparation process at military training grounds in Moscow. It stated that Russia prepares these soldiers to fight against American-made weapons and modern defense systems at the training grounds in Moscow. However, these officers were neutralized by the Ukrainian army before stepping onto the battlefield. This shows how vulnerable Russia is on the front line and how unsuccessful its efforts to compensate for the loss of troops have been. The shortage of troops in Russia is becoming a bigger and bigger problem, although the Putin administration has resorted to different sources to fill its gap. This strategy is losing its validity in the face of Ukraine's successful military operations. The Russian army is suffering more and more casualties on the ground, and these losses are not limited to Russian soldiers. Soldiers brought by Russia from abroad are also taking their share of these heavy losses. The Ukrainian army has recently established a great superiority in the battlefield with attacks using drones and advanced missile technologies. In particular, long-range missile strikes targeted weaknesses in Russia's front line, causing significant losses. Russia's losses following the attacks are changing the course of the war. The killing of North Korean soldiers in the middle of the war has called into question not only the Russian military, but also the Kremlin's strategies. The presence of these soldiers on the front line has been met with a huge international outcry. Russia's forced involvement of these soldiers in the war demonstrated the deepening of its relations with North Korea, while the neutralization of these soldiers revealed the Kremlin's failure. Russia's military strategies are often criticized internationally, and these latest developments show once again the difficulties the Russian military is facing on the battlefield. In particular, the failure of the air defense systems has become the focal point of criticism against the Putin administration. While the growing reactions in Russia have shaken confidence in Putin's war strategies, it remains to be seen how the Kremlin will respond to these criticisms. While Russian sources state that the inadequacies in the air defense systems should be eliminated as soon as possible, Putin's silence on this issue draws attention. Military sources in Russia state that the preparations made at the training grounds where North Korean officers are trained are inadequate, and therefore they are vulnerable to attack. This situation brings criticism against the training system of the Russian army. Ukraine's latest success on the ground is a major victory, not only militarily but also psychologically. Russia's strategy of outsourcing troops has once again failed in the face of Ukraine's resistance. Russia is trying to compensate for the loss of manpower in the war, but it's becoming increasingly difficult to replace them. The neutralization of North Korean troops is considered a serious mistake in the Kremlin's war strategy. What do you think? Do you think it's possible for the Russian army to make up for its losses? How should foreign soldiers fighting in the Russian army be interpreted? How do you interpret the anger of Russian sources towards the Russian leadership? Let me know in the comments. I read and care about your points of view.